And I said to them, are you perfectly satisfied with how you do research in the movie business today? And they said, well, of course not. Who's ever perfectly satisfied? That was my crack. I said, great. I had this crazy idea to pioneer online research, migrating it from mall to this. I don't know how to do it. I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know anything about the movie business. But will you take a chance on me?
Welcome to A History Marketing. I'm Andrew Mitrak, and this week my guest is Shelley Zalis. Zalis is the founder and CEO of The Female Quotient, the largest global community of women in business. But before she became a leading voice for workplace equality, Zalis was a tech pioneer who transformed the market research industry. In our interview, she tells the story of taking research from the analog world of mall intercepts and random phone dialing into the digital age. Zalis led this transformation by tackling one of the toughest industries to break into, Hollywood movies. You'll hear how she used the early internet to reinvent movie trailer testing, breaking a decades-long monopoly in the process. So this episode is packed with fantastic insider stories about marketing and Hollywood. So it's a fun one. Now here's my conversation with Shelley Zalis. Shelley Zalis, welcome to A History Marketing.
Just calling it history and marketing is interesting in and of itself, so you have me hello.
Awesome. All right. Well, you've been a driving force in marketing and market research, so I'm looking forward to a conversation about your historic career and how you've seen the industry evolve. But I want to start right at the beginning. How did you get started in market research?
How did a nice girl like me get stuck in market research? That's a really good question. It actually started by, I did think I was going into market research. It was by accident. I was at Columbia, and I was a senior year. I went to the job bulletin board, and I saw this. I was studying psychology, and I saw this great ad up that I thought was a job at an ad agency. And I love commercials, and I watch them all the time. And so creating them and working was like, wow. And I love examining people and their minds and messaging and comms. So I go to this interview, and I walk in, and there were 4 women sitting in the entry of the office, all eating ice cream and like People magazine gossiping about, celebrities and trends. And I'm like, oh my God, I love this job. Only to find out it was a market research company. I got a D in statistics, so I would never be a market research company or apply. If I thought it was market research, I would never have applied for the job. It was called video storyboards. So I thought you make these great boards and whatever. And then the owner comes out, and he's wearing wallabies, red socks, and brown corduroy pants. And his shirt was kind of messy, and his name was Dave Vadera. And lo and behold, I ended up accepting the job, and I worked there for probably 6 or 7 years, and I loved it. But I did not apply to a market research company. I thought it was an ad agency.
And so this was in the offline pre-internet era. Can you just paint a picture of what market research actually was and what it looked like at the time?
Market research for me at the time was mall intercepts. So we did mall intercepts, and we stopped people and showed them an animatic. We produced these storyboard animatics on 3/4-inch cassettes. You remember those thick things? And people would be in the malls, and they'd pop in the video. You'd sit in a little kind of place and watch it. And then it was a paper pencil survey where they would answer the questions on a survey. And even on rainy weekends, somehow we managed to get these surveys done. And it was an amazing experience for me. I did not know what qualitative was. I did not know what quantitative was. I only knew what video storyboards was. And I had a typewriter, and I did everything. I'd sit and type code, and I would tick, 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 tick to make the 5/ was across the board. That's how we coded and tabbed, decoding and tabbing. And I knew nothing more than that's what I did. And we would sit around with clients, and I'll never forget, Bausch and Lomb was a really big client of ours, and we would show them the results, and then I would just tell them what I thought. We'd watch the ads, we'd look at the results, and that's how we did market research.
you said you did everything. You were more client facing? Were you ever the person at the malls kind of getting people in, or what was sort of your role at the company?
All the
Everything.
everything, which is
Yeah.
probably why I'm a really good researcher because I understand the mindset of people. I understand what answers mean. I understand open-ended responses, closed-ended responses, but more importantly, what I really understood was taking data and telling stories from it. And that was always really my sweet spot, especially with clients. I loved that meeting when the client would come and say, "So, which commercial is better than the other one and why?" That why was so defining for me. Data is the what, and that story, that heart of how people really feel, and that it is a love relationship with a brand, and the authenticity of the story and the consistency that to me was so remarkable. And then I got a phone call one day after 6, 7 years, whatever, um, from a company called ASI that was later acquired by Ipsos, which is full circle because I was acquired by Ipsos too. And the job was coming to work at a quantitative market research company. Quantitative? What is that? And so I went into Dave's office. I said, "Dave," and I was like a daughter to him. 212-689-0207. I still remember the phone number, and this is 40 years ago. And I said to him, "What is quantitative research?" And he says, "It's basically what we do, but it's bigger sample sizes." And I said, "Well, I just got recruited by this company to come for an interview. I think it's time for me to fly. I think you need to let me go. It's time for me to go." And he says, "You're right. I don't want you to go, but go." And so I walk in to this big office. I mean, we were in a little tiny brownstone video storyboard tests. And now I go into this office with like 50 people or something. And they're not sitting around eating ice cream and talking about celebrities and people and gossip. It's like everyone is at their desk and punching away on their computers and all this kind of stuff. And the CEO comes out to greet me. And he is this tall, handsome man with a navy blue cashmere cape, Armani cape. Says, "Shelley?" I said, "Yes." Says, "Come in." And he takes me into his office and he has like a big desk and standing desk and then sofas and chairs and tables. And he says, "Okay, here's your interview. I'm going to show you 3 commercials. I think it was for either Pizza Hut or Domino's. My gut tells me it was Domino's Pizza." He says, "And you tell me which one is going to do better and why." And I'm like, "Oh, this is easy. I am so well trained for this." And he shows me the commercials. And I said, "This one did better. Here's why. Here's how they have to fix this." Da, 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 da. And he goes, "You're hired." I said, "Great." He says, "And I'm going to pay you this kind of money. And what do you need in your office?" I said, "Well, I need a typewriter and a TV." He said, "Well, why do you need a TV?" I said, "I watch TV commercials all day long. I love ads." And he says, "Okay." And he says, "In a typewriter, that's not going to happen. You're going to learn how to use a computer." And I said, not me. I think on a typewriter." And that was how I got my job at ASI.
That's really funny that you were resistant to adopt the computer because later on you'd lead the transition to online and everything. So it seems like a pretty big difference there.
Well, the interesting thing about video storyboards to ASI video storyboards was mall intercept and ASI was telephone. And we would buy to run the ads, we would buy time on unused cable channels. So those 105, 120, this is before the world was as it is today, to the point where I I was having my first child. You're a new parent. My first child, he's now 33, 34 years old. And at night when I was feeding him, I would watch infomercials. And they were on all those underutilized channels because that's how they bought time to run programming on, those channels. So it's so full circle.
So if ASI was doing things over the phone and previously you were doing mall intercepts, was there any trade-off in the quality of the data when you're doing something over the phone versus in person? Like what is, because obviously you can do a lot more scale over the phone than at a mall,
Yeah.
presumably.
I
So
mean,
what was the main difference?
Well, I think also random representative sample. I mean, if you think about going into the white pages, which is RDD, random digit dialing, back to those days of thinking of RDD, you would randomly pick that name out of a phone book. And so it's more representative. And also, you don't just recruit or stop people in the mall that look like you or sound like you or talk like you. I also never really understood how we would fill surveys in a mall on rainy weekends, yet we managed to fill them. And if you actually looked at the surveys back in those days, there were a lot of erase marks. Oh, was it really a man at this age? Or was it a woman, but you made it a man because you had to fill your quota?
Right.
Uh, Now, I have the same issues with telephone, by the way,
Yeah.
but it's a much bigger, more random population, I think, than just
Yeah. That's
geographically. This is the mall in Beverly Hills, and this is the mall in Chicago, whatever.
And when you're running this over the phone, what are your main clients? What problems are you trying to solve for them? Like, what is the primary type of thing that you're doing for them at that point?
Well, we would recruit them. This is a really long time ago, so I might not
Yeah.
remember this perfectly, but she would recruit them, and this is why we did the testing on unused channels to watch. And this is how we added recall testing, 24-hour recall to see if you can remember not only the ad, but who the brand sponsor was,
Great.
right? And so it was more pre-post recall testing and then asking them the questions about it. So that's how we did it at the time. When we were doing mall testing, you could do a 30-second, a 15, 30, 60-second ad, but you also, because you had that attention sitting down, they would also be able to see it in real time and just give you their answers. Do you like it? Do you not? But it was no. When we were doing recall testing, we embedded the advertisements into shows, and that's how we got recall measures. Is-
Gotcha.
You bring me back to 9 days.
Yeah. So the reason I want to dwell on some of these offline things, over the phone, mall intercepts, is that you were also really early when it came to online market research.
First,
Yeah, you were the first. Sorry, I didn't mean to say very early. The first, literally the first. And I'm wondering how you knew that the internet would be a big thing and not just a flash in the pan, and how you saw that this would be able to solve problems that in-person mall intercepts or kind of manual phone type market research couldn't do. Why did you know that the internet would be a big thing?
I had no idea. So I did not know. But at the time when I was at ASI, we were doing, telephone research, da da da. But I also was working on infomercials because it was a big aha moment for me. These infomercials, direct response, call to action. And so I created a dual dial technique. No one did research with infomercials because your call to action was your numbers and your metrics for success. How many people bought from the show they watched? But I always thought to myself, an infomercial is a 30-minute show, and they would always put the calls to action at the end. But what if I didn't wait until the end and I wanted to buy it? I didn't see the number. So I did a dual dial, one dial, and I did this in a central location. One dial that you could move to gauge your interest across the board, and the other dial, at what moment would you want to buy? And that is how we ended up creating call to action in a 30-minute every 8 minutes at it was mind-blowing for me, but using technology, and we did them in theater settings, and I had these dials, and, it was really quite remarkable. And the other thing that I was doing at the time, the internet online was starting to happen, but brands were creating 200-page websites. Well, brands, like for Tide laundry detergent, they would have 200 pages with the ingredients and how to do this and how to that. And I thought to myself, gosh, no one wants to read 200 pages of a website about Tide laundry detergent. And by the way, Tide doesn't create a program to advertise in, they put their advertising in other people's programs. And there was also no standards online with banner ads and split screens and skyscrapers. And I mean, do you remember how old are you?
I'm 35.
Okay. You won't. remember this then because it was just beginning, but there were no standards. A banner ad could be this big or this big or this big, this square. And so how could it if Tide wanted to buy ads across content sites, they would have to make them all different sizes. And so I built a consortium. It was called IIX, Interactive Idea Exchange, and CIA, Consortium for Interactive Advertisers, to bring 10 non-competitive advertisers together to create online advertising standards. The government called it collusionary, so we brought it to the OB, and then that's how the IB started. But that's when I started understanding, oh, by the way, what we realized about the 200-page websites, most consumers would only go to a couple of the pages. And that's how we started creating microsites for brands, where instead of creating their own website to advertise in, we took the 3 pages and moved it to other people's content sites that had audience. And so, like for Tide, we called it Stain Detective. You could go to the page and any stain you had, it would teach you how to remove it. And it wasn't, the
Yeah.
Tide wasn't always the solution. And it was amazing.
And so you're doing this, just place me in your career. Is this after you've left ASI and you've started OTX that you're doing this? Or this is while you're still at ASI and you're doing this?
This is before I had the idea, but by testing websites, I had the idea, well, why don't we migrate research from offline to online by creating a research website?
Right.
And that was how I got the idea to test shows, commercials, all of that inside a website by recruiting people to that website to test. And that
Yeah.
was the whole epiphany around it, which is why I told you about infomercials and website testing, because it was how I ended up coming up with the idea of online research.
And so when you came up with the idea for online research and you pitched it to your bosses at ASI, I'm sure they were like, yes, let's do this. Let's all change. Is that what happened?
No, not at all. My bosses, so I went to them and I said, "Oh, I have this really big idea. Let's migrate research from offline to online." ASI had just gotten acquired by Ipsos, and my bosses and bosses' bosses and bosses' bosses all said to me, "Well, it's not the right time." I said, "Not the right time? Why?" They said, "Well, first of all, Ipsos just acquired us and they want us to go global. So we have to invest all of our resources in global expansion because we were very US centric. And second of all, no one's online except wealthy old men with broadband connections. And to test video, you needed high speed, but there was no high speed. The majority of people that were even online were on 14.4 modems. Clunky and definitely not consistent if you're going to show video to show consistency, and you need that for research. And because no one's online, you can't get a representative population. So everything that they were telling me was why not versus why yes. And so a week later, I'm on a panel with Larry Mock, who was the chief research officer of Procter and Gamble, the largest consumer packaged meat company in the world. And my bosses were all in the front row, and I'm whispering to Larry. And Larry was very famous, very well known as a market researcher. You should interview him. He'll tell you. And I said to him, "Larry, when is the right time to come and talk to you about migrating research from offline to online?" And he said, "Next week." I said, "Great." So I come off the stage and my boss said, "What'd he say? What'd he say?" I said, I just asked him, "When is the right time? Because you told me there needs to be a right time. I want to know when that right time is to come and talk to Procter and Gamble." And they said, "Well, what is that?" He said, "Come next week." I said, "Great. John will go, Paul will go, Ringo will go, and Star will go." I'm like, "What about Shelley?" And it's my idea. I got the yes. And if I'm not going, I'm going to cancel the meeting and wait for the right time. And that was my moment of truth. It was, not the cognitive. I always talk about heartbeat moments. It was my heartbeat moment that I'd rather be in charge. Why am I always being told I'm not the right one? It's not the right time. It's not going to work. It's not possible. I'm going to fail. La, 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 la. And that's when I left and started OTX. Uh, Had to.
So literally, so that was the moment that you decided I've got to start my own company. These folks they're going to miss out. They don't know what they're doing, and I need to be in control of my own destiny. When you found OTX, this type of company just didn't exist before, right? It was the first of its kind. So how did you know what you needed to do to build OTX? It's like, okay, I'm going to found it. What then? Like, what are the first decisions you make to build this new type of market research company?
Well, what's crazy about that story is when I was doing website testing, I had hired this young guy, his name was Trevor Kaufman, to help. I didn't know anything about online or whatever. So he helped a lot. I mean, I actually went around with a presentation, and there's another amazing guy in my life, Brendan Light, that was at ASI with me that played on all this stuff. And Jim Spade, he's another good person for you. You interview Bill Molt. And I said to him, will you help me build a website for online research? And if anyone buys it, I will give you $1 million. He was 20, 21 years old. And so we built it in my basement. And I brought the idea to Nielsen. And I said to Nielsen, I have this crazy idea to migrate research to online. And they said, we love it. What do you need? I said, I need $1 million to give to this young kid. And we ended up giving Trevor the money. But it was over a year helping, do the research and test and whatever. But I say, we made him a millionaire at a very young age. And I pioneered at Nielsen, and I called it Real Research, REEL Research. And I decided I was going to start in movie research, movie testing. Why? I knew nothing about the movie business. Sippo, zero, nada. But I knew that if I could test movies and trailers, which were 2.5 minutes long versus 30 seconds for CPG clients, womb to tomb, nothing changes, I could do anything. So if I go for the hardest category and build around that, then the rest is easy. And there was only one person in the entire world doing movie research, and his name was Joe Farrell. And this story is so crazy, like you can't make this up. Joe Farrell had a monopoly. Nobody could break the monopoly of NRG. Joe Farrell. He was the godfather. They called him the godfather of movies and movie research. And crazy enough, let's go back to video storyboard days. He tested trailers in the malls. So now I'm back to my video storyboard days. And successfully, and he was the CEO whisperer. He was the whisperer to everyone. He would tell someone, this movie's going to be big, move the date. Like, and no one could break his monopoly. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to try. And I'm going to go in with online research. And I realized there's always a yes, you just have to find it. But no one was able to find it until I came along. And so I decided, I went to Warner Brothers. And there was a guy named Dan Rosen and Richard DeBelso. I'm so grateful for them. And I said to them, are you perfectly satisfied with how you do research in the movie business today? And they said, well, of course not. Who's ever perfectly satisfied? That was my crack. Yeah. I said, great. I had this crazy idea to pioneer online research, migrating it from mall to this. I don't know how to do it. I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know anything about the movie business. But will you take a chance on me? And Dan will tell you it's because I actually told him the truth. I know nothing about this, but we're going to hold hands and go together. And I said, and all I want from you is to give me every ad you've tested in the mall and let me test it online so I can calibrate the norms. And it won't cost you a nickel. And he said, great, I'm in. He said, the only problem is we have exclusive contracts with Joe Farrell and we'll get sued. I said, let me see the contract. I look at the contract, and it was exclusive, but it was exclusive for mall testing, mall intercepted. There was no online. I said, Dan, loophole. I'm online. He's mall intercept. So you're not breaking the exclusivity with another mall intercept testing company. I'm online. And so that was that. Partners, hand in hand. And we held hands, and I tested everything in parallel. Now, The interesting part was you couldn't just so and they called me Jane Doe because if Joe Farrell would have found out, it wouldn't have been a good thing. Not that they were breaking contract, but he might have withheld information from them when Joe Farrell used to call me her. If you're gonna work with her, he called me her, and I liked that. That was really good.
Yeah.
But we also had the producers and the directors that were all comfortable with offline data. So I said to Dan and to Richard, don't go in with online data because A, it's not reliable yet. I don't know what it means. We haven't calibrated the norms. I'm not comfortable. But what I do want you to go in with is the verbatim testimony because in the malls, they would scribble the answers of what did you like about it? There were two things. What did you like and what didn't you like about the commercial or the trailer or whatever? But online, the verbatim testimonies were wow. They were the wow factor because people with the answers, robust answers in bold type in capitals when they want to say, I love Brad Pitt. I love. I said, so go in with the quantitative results from Joe Farrell and then just supplement and don't say it's another company. Just go in with these verbatims, add the verbatims, and they go the verbatims. And the producers are all, what the fuck? Where should get this amazing verbatims all of a sudden? And he said, oh, online. We're doing it online. And everyone started saying, I want the online. I want the online version. And lo and behold, we started calibrating the norms. And not only did I do Warner Brothers, but I went to Sony. And I said to Sony, Warner Brothers is using it. And as soon as you say that, Sony's like, oh, me too. And then Disney, oh, me too, me too, me too. Power of the pack, power of publish. And next thing you knew, we were in. And then all these, am I telling you too many pieces of this story?
No, this is great. Yeah.
Then all these CEO, the studio chiefs and the, by the way, Joe Farrell was the godfather to their children. So this was not an easy thing to break. And all of them had these decks, paper stacks, paper stacks, paper stacks. And I said, I'm not going to deliver paper. We're going to deliver the reports online. And they're like, no one's going to read them. No one is online. I said, okay, I am going to deliver a teaser in paper with chocolate chip cookies and milk. And it'll have a code to go online. And sooner than later, everyone was doing online. And then Joe Farrell, who would always say, oh, everyone lies online. It's terrible methodology. You're all da 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 da. But we also did movie research online, predicting. I mean, and we were nailing it. I mean, and he kept saying, "Not, it's not this, it's not that," and telephone and mall is the way to go. And I said, how do you know that people in the mall and people on the telephone don't lie? Why are you just attributing this to a new methodology and look at what it's not versus what it is? What percentage of people lie online too? What percentage have you looked at those paper trails? And I only knew this because I've been there. I did telephone and I did mall. So you can't mess with me. I've been there, done that. Right. Anyways, those were all the little loopholes of how we actually created online. And the next thing you knew, Joe Farrell started going online, trying to build an online business, but we were already in online.
Right. Yeah. So National Research Group NRG is founded in like the 70s or something like that, right? So it'd been around for a long time, wrote all its contracts for malls, which is the only way to do it back then. Along comes a new paradigm online, and you find this wedge because the new paradigm, new market opportunity, and also your position. It's OTX. Online is the O. So everybody, you're branded as the online expert. So I imagine if 1970s founded Joe Farrell, old school way of doing things, repositions to be online, it just doesn't quite have the credibility that you have. And it seems like you also found product market fit because a movie trailer is it's probably one of the few types of ads that people actually want to go out and see. Usually people have ad blockers, but some of the most popular videos online are new movie trailers. So you can actually watch those. And they're probably short enough where the buffering and the bandwidth probably somewhat works. If it's, much longer than that.
It worked because it was 2.5 minutes. And so we had it download in the background as it was loading. So it was not easy, especially on 14.4 modems, and maybe the fast ones were 28.8. And people with T1 lines were not representative. They were mainstream. So, and I had to ensure that everyone saw the same quality. And so what we did was we built this buffering mechanism that allowed the video to download as you were answering questions in the survey, so that by the time it opened, it would be already downloaded and you would have smooth sailing. I used an analysis. It was sort of like if you're on a freeway that is jammed, you go really slow. If there's no one on the freeway, you go really fast, but you have to be able to build it so that everyone has the same experience. And then protecting the video, because in the movie business, a movie could close before it opens. It's all about then. I mean, it was all about opening weekend. And the reason I built it for the hardest common denominator was because the studio would send you 20 ads on a Friday night that had to be encrypted, encoded. If you're just sending it to mall, boom. If you need to encode, encrypt, and then get big enough sample sizes, I think we were doing 300 because I had to match what Joe Farrell was doing. It was 200, 300 per trailer or commercial that had to be given back to the studio by Monday morning. And I remember in those days when I built the system, we had a refresh button, refresh, 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 because I had to make sure that there was 300 people filling out the survey. By the way, by the 4 quads too. A movie is by male, female, under, over 25, 4 quads. It's a 4 quad methodology. And if I could build a system that could encrypt, encode, get the surveys up, get the samples in and deliver results online by Monday morning, I could do anything. And we had to build a DRM solution, which didn't exist. DRM, do you have DRM today?
Digital rights management, right?
No, it didn't exist. I had to build an encryption system because I'll never forget this moment on a Friday night. I'm having dinner with my family at online, you're always on. There is no off button. You're always on. And I get a phone call from a lawyer at one of our studios that said, and it was for one of the biggest films of all time. And someone lifted the trailer. Now, these trailers are not aired, and they lifted the trailer and broadcast it out. Now, thank God the trailer did really well. And it was going to be a blockbuster. But that was scary as shit. And I remember saying to the lawyers, first of all, trailers have been lifted in the mall. So let's not, you know. Second of all, that is the risk with online. It ended up doing well. And I said, maybe this is a new way of going viral, that the talk. And I said, and third of all, it took 24, 27, I can't remember the number, but a group of hackers. It wasn't just a single individual. It was a group of hackers, sophisticated hackers, because it was a superhero thing. It took a group of them over 24 hours of nonstop working to break my code. 24 hours with over 25 people. I said, so it's pretty fucking secure. Like, I said, you go see how easy it is to lift one of those tapes that you've lying around between intercepting UPS and FedEx packages to, somebody not paying attention to someone pulling that. You tell me that that's never happened to you before. But that was a moment. And so we built a DRM solution to wrap around the videos.
What was your relationship like with filmmakers themselves? I imagine a superhero movie, hey, if they want to test, and get, all 4 quadrants and that, but there's probably certain auteur type filmmakers who, see their film as their baby. Did you ever like have relationships with them when they like saw, oh, testing, they're the bad guys who just want to change my artwork? Or yeah, what was the relationship like? And do you have any examples of changes that were made to movies or movie trailers as a result of the tests?
So we tested so many trailers, and for them, there was no They created them, and all we were doing was showing them which one was gonna do the best, and of course, it wasn't just for quads. They would say, "This is our target," and we had to reach the target, and after a while, I had an enormous community. I called it the blender. Um, Now that people call it a router or whatever, and the way I built the sample, because that didn't exist either, I had to build a sample ecosystem. I had to build an RDD online. So, think about RDD offline is the telephone book concept. I I was actually teaching a class, as a guest lecturer at Wharton in the business school, and I remember telling the students how I came up with the sample methodology for online. I said I closed my eyes one day and tried to imagine RDD on steroids, but online. And so I mixed all of these samples from Greenfield to Harris Interactive to AOL to I helped a company that was doing mobile using mobile, and I put them all into this blender, so it was a blend, and I said, "It's sort of like one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish." And I took the entire class downstairs to the library to read one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish. And I said, "You need all kinds of fish in the ocean, different fish in the lake, different if you want an ecosystem of representation." And that was the idea of, and then eventually I ended up having 12, 20 sample companies, 50 sample companies, whatever, all da, 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 and it would go like this. And the router was the hardest thing to build, that the first male 25 would go into that survey. I was doing 100 surveys at a time. Go to that one, the next one into that one, that one. So it was representation on steroids, and it was magical. The movies, Andrew, the movies we tested in real life, that was not online because 2.5 in it, and so we did that the old school way, but we didn't start with movie testing. We started with trailer testing online, and then the movies just came our way, and what was amazing about the realness of it, because you in testing a movie, you wanna smell people, you wanna see people, you wanna hear people. The a movie director, producer would hear when someone would laugh or when someone would cry, or so that we did it offline.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So I could spend hours just talking about movies in this early internet era because I'm fascinated. I love movies, and I'm always fascinated by early internet history as well. But I know we have limited time, and I want to just jump ahead in your career to the female quotient. You wind up selling OTX to Ipsos.
So,
You sold it 3 times. What were the stories of selling it?
well, I first went and pioneered at Nielsen, and I had to build from scratch, you know, and then I left Nielsen because they wanted to walk and I had to run, and all the other divisions of Nielsen started competing over, and then now it's called Nielsen Online, but it started from Real Research, REEL, Real Research.
Okay, I misunderstood. I thought you had sold like the product, like they were buying or licensing the product, but you sold the company itself to Nielsen.
No, I did not get anything from Nielsen. I was an employee. I brought the idea to Nielsen and pioneered at Nielsen,
Okay.
and I got this young kid money, but I was a salaried employee with a big idea
Okay.
that needed to see it come to life. I then left Nielsen because people were starting to compete with who would run my business that was incredibly successful. So I left it behind and I joined iFilm.
Okay.
iFilm, I was an owner at iFilm. iFilm, do you remember iFilm?
I know I've seen the logo iFilm a number of times.
But you would have seen it because iFilm was the first YouTube. It was so ahead of itself, but it was YouTube. Let's just, and it's so funny. And so I went to iFilm. It was run by Kevin Wendell, who was the founder of CNET, and Skip Poll. And they they were a .com company so ahead of itself. But the reason I joined them was they understood video on the internet, and they understood the internet, and they wanted to run, and they were obsessed with Real Research that then became AC Nielsen Online, and that's when I called it OTX. And I built in a warehouse. It was like really a .com, and I was surrounded by young, techie, entrepreneurial people. I was like in heaven as a traditional researcher to now be in this spirited place. And my business ended up growing exponentially. And I used off the shelf technology that I modified using iFilm's help. It was called iFilm OTX. It was booming and I loved it. And I sold from iFilm. Well, iFilm was doing video. And one day I heard that they wanted to go into porn. But by the way, don't forget this is online and they should. Like they had all the channels. That should be a channel.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's just, do you want to work there? Do you want to work at a company doing that?
iFilm
Yeah.
OTX because they wanted the iFilm brand on top. I came with the name OTX. They said we are going to call it iFilm OTX. Anyways, I walked into a board meeting one day and I said, here's the deal. You should go all in porn, but go triple X because that's where the money's going to be. And I'm out. And so I sold from iFilm to Strauss Zelnick and Bob Pittman. And Bob had just started a company called Pilot. He had left AOL Time Warner. Strauss Zelnick was a VC, and I sold to them. So that was the second, because I'll call going to iFilm, then going to and iFilm, my ownership was in terms of revenue because 0 on 0 is 0. No one thought I would be successful. And I ended up, you know, selling, I think, doing 30 million in revenue at the time. And that I sold to Bob Pittman and Strauss Zelnick and stayed with them for a few years. And then we sold to Ipsos.
I wish I could spend more time going on this.
I like I've never told you this about my date.
No, I love hearing it this way. I love all these details, and I want to like spend proper time on all of that. But also, like, I can't talk to you without also, of course, talking about the female quotient. And so you transition from innovating in research to innovating in culture with the female quotient, where you're founder, CEO, and chief troublemaker. When did this start? Has this it sounds like this is, the female quotient and equality and the values that are with this have been with you for forever. But was there a moment when you knew this needed to be its own company?
Yeah. So I'm at Ipsos now. When I went to Ipsos, I had 250 employees when they acquired me. I had 200. There's actually something before that, but I'll say in a minute. I had 250 employees. I was doing 60 million in revenue, and I was operating in 6 cities. I now sell to a company doing 2.6 billion in revenue, 16,000 employees, operating in 83 countries. Now, my dream was I wanted to sell to a VC, not to a traditional research company, because I was going back to the Nielsen days then. And we had 10 out of 10 offers from different VCs. I accepted one, and then and they were going to buy us for $100 million. And my only wish and my only ask wasn't about salary. It was that you can buy me for $100 million, but I want $100 million shopping budget. I want to go buy all these small, new, up and coming technology companies that's going to make the online research business go to a whole other level. And I got a yes, and the deal was done, signed, sealed, and delivered. And then the market fell. The .com market, boom, fell. The head partner of the deal calls me up, and I'm in Hawaii celebrating with my family. She calls me up, Vivian, and she says, I have good news and bad news. What do you want to hear first? I said, the good news. She says, we're still going to go through with the deal. 100 million, no problem, signed, sealed, and delivered. I said, bad news. She goes, I can't guarantee you the 100 million shopping budget. And I said to her, I'm so grateful, but I can't do it. I said, because especially with the world collapsing, the traditional market research companies are going to win. And my little cute company, it will disappear because it's the alternative. It's the and. It's not the either or yet. And I had to walk away. At Bob and Strauss were really pissed at me. But I kiboshed the deal because they were to cash out. I cared about my employees and my team and growth and innovation and all of that. And I needed that innovation budget, of which I didn't have with Strauss and Bob. And so I waited longer, and then Ipsos came and acquired us. And so while I was at Ipsos, I was the only female CEO, top 25 in market research, when I had OTX. Didn't stop me, but I knew I thought differently. I acted differently. I led differently. I knew all those things, but didn't matter. It was my company. I gave myself permission and I was doing you know, just fine. And now I'm at Ipsos. I'm sitting at a board, publicly traded company, two women on a board of 26. And they were moving my employees around like chess pieces. And tears came down my eyes. And I was pulled aside after, and I was told by the HR person, there's no room for emotion in the boardroom. My head said, just agree, because I just bought my company for a lot of money. And my heart said, no way. And so I went and gave a speech to thousands. I was a global speaker at this point. And my speech was called Bring Emotion to the Boardroom, exclamation point, heart, heart, heart. And that was that. And it was clear to me that with the power that I had, with the position that I had, with the purpose that I had, with the passion that I had, that I needed to give back with generosity what I wish I had my entire career, which was girlfriends in business. And so while I was at Ipsos, I started the Ipsos Girls Lounge because I wanted to go to CES, 150,000 people, less than 3% were women. And I did just fine in the predominantly male dominated conferences, but it was boring and it wasn't fun. And I wasn't surrounded by people just like me. So I invited 5 girlfriends. I said, walk the floor with me at CES. And if you have other girlfriends, invite them. 24 hours later, 50 women showed up. And two remarkable things happened at the time. One, every single guy's head turned. Where the hell did all you women come from? And that's when I coined the phrase power of the pack. A woman led its power, collectively we have impact. And the second was I was surrounded by women just like me, imposter syndrome, work-life balance. How do you do it all? How do you stand out as a woman in business, thinking differently, acting differently, behaving differently, and not wearing those ugly suits and the ugly shoes and trying to fit in? How do we stand out the way we want to? And that was when the Girls Lounge was born. And we were all doing deals in my bedroom. It was a king size bedroom. And by day 2, 100 women. By day 3, 350 women. We took over the penthouse suite. Boom. Girls Lounge was born. And I called it the Ipsos Girls Lounge. Then my 5-year contract ended and I had nowhere now, but I'm very loyal. And they wanted to renew my contract and blah, blah, blah. And I said to them, I will, as long as you commit in writing to keep funding the Ipsos Girls Lounge, because it's really important to me. My contract came back and, my package was in there, but there was no Girls Lounge. And I said, well, where's the Girls Lounge? They said, we want to do it, but, we can't guarantee. I said, no guarantee means it's not going to happen. And I said, I'm not resigning. I'm just not renewing. And I'm going to take the Girls Lounge with me because it's not important to you. So I'm going to take it and you could become the first partner in the Girls Lounge. That was over 10 years ago. And today, the Girls Lounge has evolved to the FQ Lounge. It's brought to you by all, collectively by amazing Fortune 500 companies, men and women. We have over 7 million plus women in business across 30 industries, 100 countries that are part of the pack. So from the OG of 5 to now over 7 million. We host pop-ups all over the world at industry conferences, but we also do pop-ups and summits across different categories. We also are now in the media business, waking up one day to a very unique community of over 7 million B2B women in business is one of a kind. And then, we have an advisory practice, advising Fortune 500 CEOs on how to close the gender gap across the board, but more importantly, how to make everyone feel seen, heard, and belong.
Yeah. Yeah. Seeing your content online, the community you've built, people's reaction to this, the amazing storytelling your team does across all social channels. It's just so inspiring and it's so amazing to see what you've built. I wish we had more time together so I could just ask you more and more about this, but I've really appreciated your time, your stories from your career, from market research, from all those really cool inside Hollywood stories of film trailer testing online. Shelley Zalis, just thanks so much for your time. I really appreciated it.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Andrew, because you asked the questions that haven't been asked and putting it in a timeline, not timeline, but the linearity of where we were to where we are, but also to where we're going is so incredibly important. And I call people like you conscious leaders because you're just conscious, and it's not whether you're a man or a woman. It's about the intentionality. And so thank you for your intentionality and your passion for all of this and for being a new dad.
Thanks so much. Well, I know your career inspires so many people, including myself, and just hearing from where you've come from and all of the gritty details along the way and everything you did, it's just so inspiring to hear. So, Shelley Zalis, thanks so much for joining me. A History of Marketing is researched and edited by me, Andrew Mitrak. If you'd like new episodes delivered right to your inbox, visit marketinghistory.org. There you can also find transcripts of every conversation, including helpful links, images, videos, and other blogs about marketing history. You can send me an email at hello@marketinghistory.org. This podcast is a passion project of mine, and I have zero interest in monetizing it. But if you'd like to support A History of Marketing, consider leaving a review on your favorite podcasting app. Or better yet, tell a friend about the show. Thanks for listening.